Welcome, traveler. Tonight we journey north, to the edge of the world, where the sea swallowed a city that once believed it could outthink the gods. Breathe slowly. Let the sound of the wind and water carry the weight of the day away. You do not need to search for answers here. Just listen to what remains of Winterhold, the city that fell to the sea, the edge of the world. There is a place in Skyrim where the land simply stops. A frozen cliff where earth and sea meet in a long, exhausted sigh. Here, what remains of Winterhold clings to the rock like a ghost, refusing to vanish. Broken towers tilt against the gray horizon, their shadows bending into the ice below. And beneath them the sea moves, slow, constant, patient, as if reminding the ruins above that it always wins in the end. The air here is sharp enough to taste. Salt mixes with frost, and every breath feels like history exhaled through cold stone. If you stand long enough at the cliff's edge, you can almost hear the echo of the city that once stood proud upon this shore. The laughter of markets, the ringing of bells from the college spires, the hum of torches and song, but those sounds fade quickly, replaced by the long rhythm of the sea's breathing. The only voice left that never lies. Once, long before the collapse, Winterhold was called the Crown of the North. It was a city of intellect and trade, a sanctuary for both scholars and sailors, a meeting point between the mysteries of the arcane and the endurance of those who braved the sea of ghosts. Ships from Solitude and Windhelm filled its docks, their masts rising like a second forest above the bay. In those days, people spoke of Winterhold with awe. They said its walls shone at night, glazed with frost so pure that torchlight bent like glass upon it. Even the stars seemed to hang closer to its towers. But the North is not a gentle teacher. It rewards arrogance with erosion and certainty with silence. The same wind that carries prayer also carries warning. And so, while the scholars of the college reached higher, drawing runes against the sky and shaping frost into flame, the sea below watched and waited. The College of Winterhold was both the heart and the fault line of the city. It was not merely a place of learning, but of ambition, a gathering of minds that believed knowledge was the truest form of worship. The halls echoed with experiment and argument, with the language of discovery spoken in tones that sometimes bordered on devotion. To walk its bridges was to walk between faith and reason. Even now, when storms break upon its walls, the sound resembles chanting, as if the wind itself has learned the syllables of their forgotten oaths. People admired the college, but they also feared it. There were whispers that its scholars had begun to ask questions meant only for the gods. To bend the laws of nature the way a musician bends a note, softly at first, then until it breaks. They sought to see the structure beneath reality, to touch the pattern that binds existence itself. Some called this genius, others heresy. But either way, Winterhold prospered. For a time. The collapse came without ceremony. No prophecy, no trumpet, no divine declaration. Just the slow giving way of earth to sea. A surrender long in the making. It is said that the ground cracked first with a sound like distant thunder, and then, without warning, the northern quarter of the city fell away. Buildings that had stood for generations slid into the water like ships returning home. Streets became waves, and the ocean, which had waited centuries for its due, finally claimed what man had borrowed. When morning came, half the city was gone. The docks, the markets, entire families swallowed without trace. Only the college remained, untouched, serene, standing on its narrow rock as if nothing had happened. To those who survived, that stillness was unbearable. Some called it proof of divine favor, others proof of guilt. It is in human nature to seek reason in ruin. To name a cause is to believe we could have stopped it, So they blamed the mages. They said the college had angered the gods, that their experiments had weakened the land, that their pride had cracked the world itself. The mages, in turn, said nothing. What could they say? To deny was to seem guilty. To confess was to invite extinction. And so, like the stones of their ruined city, they endured the accusation in silence. Those who visit Winterhold today find little of what once was. The streets are buried in snow, the docks long swallowed. Wind moves through empty frames where windows used to glow. And yet, in that desolation, there is a strange peace, a quiet too complete to be tragic. The sea has not destroyed Winterhold. It has preserved it in the only way it knows how, by holding it in memory. Stand long enough at the edge, and you may feel it. A slow vibration through the stone, as if the world itself is still remembering the moment it changed. This is not imagination. It is continuity, the echo of cause reverberating through consequence. Some say the college still hums because the past has not finished speaking, that beneath the frozen cliffs lie chambers of air, sealed off when the city fell, that voices, trapped in the moment of collapse, still drift upward when the wind is right. Perhaps it is only the sound of ice moving, or perhaps, based on what the survivors recorded and the peculiar tonal resonance noted by travelers, we can assume that some structures beneath the sea yet remain intact, stone vaults filled with both ruin and reverence. To listen here is to stand at the border of myth and geology. The line between truth and interpretation has eroded like the cliff itself. But maybe that is the point. Winterhold teaches that the exact shape of truth matters less than the patience to face it. The Stoics wrote that understanding is not possession. It is alignment with what is. The mages sought possession. The sea offered alignment. And the balance between them is what remains. As the wind rises, the snow shifts across the stones like slow, deliberate breath. There is no sound of mourning here, only endurance. And in that endurance lies something almost holy. A city can fall, but the will to remember it, that quiet, persistent will, cannot be drowned. So breathe. Let the silence of Winterhold speak in its own language, the language of consequence, patience, and calm. For this is the edge of the world, and every edge, no matter how final, is still part of the same circle. The age of glory. There was a time when Winterhold glittered like the northern lights themselves. Before the sea rose to claim its walls, before the snow learned to speak its name in mourning, the city stood proud upon the edge of the world, a beacon of intellect, faith, and frost. The stories say that in those days, even the winds of the Sea of Ghosts paused as they passed her towers, as if unwilling to disturb the fragile perfection of a city that believed in thought more than in gods. From a distance, Winterhold looked less like a settlement and more like an idea carved into the cliff, a geometry of belief, ambition, and cold endurance. The city of white and fire. To approach Winterhold at dusk was to witness a contradiction. Snow gathered on the roofs, but the streets glowed with warmth. Lanterns burned amber light through crystalline air. Each window flickered with the steady pulse of study. Merchants' voices blended with the low chanting of scholars reciting formulas under their breath. The smell of salt, parchment, and burning oil hung over the stone like memory. Ships lined the harbor in perfect rows, their sails painted with crests of every hold in Skyrim, and some from beyond. Traders brought spices from Hammerfell, fabrics from Cyrodiil, scrolls from the imperial city. It was said that if you could not find something in the markets of Winterhold, then it had not yet been imagined. The streets followed no simple plan. They curved and split like thought itself, a reflection of the city's belief that order could coexist with mystery. Between the houses, thin bridges arched over frozen canals, linking one quarter to another like veins beneath translucent skin. At night, the frost caught the lamplight and scattered it into colors too subtle for language. The mind of the North Winterhold's strength was never its army, nor its wealth. It was its mind. For generations, the city had been home to philosophers, poets, and mages. Its people did not merely build with stone. They built with questions. Every hall had its debates, every tavern its treatise, every evening its small revolution of ideas. The old Jarl of those days, Jarl Renald the Wise, was said to have kept a single chair in his throne room, carved from driftwood and plain as prayer. When asked why he ruled without splendor, he would smile and say, "Because knowledge needs space to breathe." It was under his reign that the College of Winterhold was formally chartered, not as a fortress, but as a sanctuary. Its founding was not born of conquest, but of curiosity. Scholars from across Tamriel came seeking permission to ask questions others feared to voice. Elves from Somerset, scholars from Cyrodiil, even wanderers from Morrowind, all found a place among its halls. There were no uniforms, no chains of rank, only circles of discourse, each voice adding to the symphony of pursuit. The college before the fall. In its prime, the college was more than an institution. It was a living organism. The Hall of the Elements shimmered with enchanted light, its great dome etched with runes that shifted color as spells were tested below. Students moved through corridors lined with ice crystal windows, their footsteps echoing like verses in a sacred text. Here, flame danced in hands as easily as words passed between friends. Magic was not a weapon. It was language, a way of translating thought into matter. Lectures were held in open courtyards despite the cold. Mages believed the air itself could carry clarity, that frost sharpened the mind the way silence refines a thought. They spoke of the world as a web of laws and probabilities, a design that could be understood, not worshipped. In those years, the college reached a kind of peace between ambition and respect. There were boundaries to curiosity, lines drawn not by fear, but by philosophy. But such lines are delicate. They shift, erode, blur, and where brilliance walks beside pride, it takes only one misstep for wonder to become hubris. The Bridge of Voices. The bridge leading to the college was itself a marvel. It stretched across the gulf between cliff and keep, suspended by enchantments that hummed faintly even in silence. Travelers crossing it for the first time described feeling weightless, as though the air itself approved of learning. At night, the bridge glowed with faint blue light, not from torches, but from the spells woven into its foundation. Bards wrote songs about that bridge. They said it connected not only land to land, but the known world to the infinite. One verse, still remembered by the few who remain, spoke simply, "We built a road not of stone, but of questions." And the wind answered. To cross it was a rite of passage. Apprentices whispered oaths beneath their breath as they stepped onto its frozen span, to seek truth, to honor humility, to never treat knowledge as conquest. Most kept their oaths, some forgot. The glow of Winterhold. The people who lived outside the college, the traders, sailors, smiths, were not ignorant of magic. They simply revered it differently. They saw it as weather, beautiful, unpredictable, dangerous if disrespected. They did not meddle in its patterns, but they built their lives in its light. Even the taverns were full of quiet awe. Stories of mages conjuring warmth for the poor or lighting the harbor for lost ships circulated each night as both comfort and warning. There was, in those days, an agreement between the magical and the mundane, a truce between the dreamers and the doers. Each needed the other. The college gave Winterhold meaning. The city gave the college purpose. It was a balance delicate enough to be holy. The sound of the north. Those who visited spoke often of Winterhold's soundscape, the faint crackle of frost meeting flame in the distance, the constant whisper of wind through runed glass, and above it all, the low toll of the college bells. Their tone was not mournful but serene, like time itself announcing that it was willing to wait. Even now, divers claim to hear those bells faintly beneath the waves, as though the sea, in drowning the city, had learned to imitate its music. It is easy to romanticize a past so far away, to imagine purities where there was only effort. But perhaps that is what made Winterhold beautiful. It was never perfect, only earnest. Its people believed in improvement, in the idea that ignorance was not a sin, but an opportunity. They were, in their own way, deeply Stoic. They sought to understand the world, not to control it, but to align themselves with it, to live according to nature, even as they tried to read its laws. The sky above knowledge. Winterhold's sky was different. At night, the auroras spread like paint across an invisible canvas, moving in rhythm with something no one could measure. Scholars would watch the heavens from the college parapets, taking notes in frost-bitten fingers, murmuring equations that attempted to describe beauty. Some said the auroras were fragments of magic released from the earth. Others believed they were the dreams of the gods escaping into the air. No one could prove which was true, but they all agreed that to watch those lights was to be reminded how small even wisdom could feel beneath the infinite. The unseen fracture. If there is one truth that binds all human ambition, it is this: nothing fails all at once. Before the collapse, there were signs, small, polite betrayals of balance. The tides shifted unpredictably. Books in the college's archives began to warp at the edges, their ink bleeding into symbols no one had written. And some nights, the glow from the college towers dimmed for a moment, as if the structure itself had held its breath. Few noticed, fewer cared. When brilliance becomes normal, warning feels like inconvenience. In retrospect, the Age of Glory was not simply Winterhold's triumph. It was its test. A civilization built on intellect, tested by humility. The two could have coexisted forever, had not the sea and what it represents come to remind them that nothing built upon pride lasts. But in those golden years, before the water rose, before the scholars fell silent, Winterhold stood radiant on the edge of the world, a mind made of stone and snow, a city that believed the universe could be written down. And for a while, a brief, brilliant while, it almost was the college and the sky. They say that when the first foundation stones of the college were laid, the sky above Winterhold opened with light. It was not a storm, nor an omen, but something quieter, a shimmer in the air, like the world itself was curious to see what would happen. The masons paused. The apprentices raised their heads, and for a brief moment the auroras hung motionless, as if the heavens themselves were listening. No one recorded that silence, but it lingers in the air around the college even now, a stillness that feels older than the stones. The college was not built as a fortress. Its founders, an order of scholars known as the Seekers of Magnus, believed that walls existed only to hold back ignorance, not enemies. So they designed their halls to breathe. The buildings were arranged in circles, each connected by open bridges that cut through the northern wind. To walk its paths was to walk through air, a constant reminder that knowledge requires exposure. The seekers believed that wisdom was not found in hiding from the world, but in standing within it, facing its cold without retreat. And so the college stood not as defiance against nature, but as a dialogue with it. Its towers pointed upward not in arrogance, but in conversation. They called their central hall the Eye, for it was built to mirror the sky, a perfect dome of white stone that reflected the auroras at night. Within that dome, the scholars gathered each dawn and dusk to read the shifting lights like scripture. The patterns of green and violet became their sacred text. Each curve and ripple, a syllable in a language the gods had forgotten to explain. There was no single leader in those early days. The college was a republic of thought, governed by the rhythm of debate rather than decree. Each scholar was expected to contribute, not obedience, but clarity. They believed that disagreement, when pursued with respect, was the purest form of devotion. Truth, one of them wrote, is not discovered by one mind, but by the echo of many minds correcting each other. It was a noble idea, and like all noble ideas, fragile, because when many voices speak of truth, eventually one begins to wonder who among them should be believed. And from that wondering comes hierarchy, and from hierarchy, ambition. But in the beginning, it was enough simply to look. The first generations of mages studied the sky the way others studied scripture. To them, light was language. They charted the auroras, measuring their frequency and hue. They wrote treatises on the rhythm of stars, arguing that celestial movement was not divine whim, but law, precise, patient, eternal. It was, in its way, a Stoic vision of the cosmos, not ruled by gods, but governed by reason. They called this pursuit astromancy, and it became the college's oldest discipline. Students would spend whole nights on the parapets, their fingers stiff from cold, their eyes fixed on the horizon where sea and sky met. Some froze to death in that devotion, their quills still held upright, their notes preserved in frost. To them, the pursuit of understanding was worth the cost. Better to die in clarity, they said, than live in comfortable ignorance. Such words sound brave, but courage, too, can be a form of vanity. The second discipline was more grounded, though no less ambitious. They called it tonalmancy, the study of resonance between sound, soul, and substance. Its practitioners believed that every object, every thought, carried a frequency. To find harmony with that frequency was to command it. They walked through the college, humming soft notes, each one tuned to the materials around them: stone, flame, water, air. To hear the halls filled with these tones was to walk through a cathedral of vibration. Visitors described the college as alive, a structure that sang to itself, and perhaps it did. For when the first great storms hit the northern coast, it was said that the college's towers did not tremble. Instead, they resonated, absorbing the wind, turning chaos into music. Whether this was truth or poetic exaggeration hardly matters now. What matters is that they believed it, and belief, when held by enough minds, has its own gravity. The third and final discipline of those early years was the most dangerous, transliminal study. It dealt not with what could be measured, but with what waited beyond measurement. Its scholars claimed that the veil between reality and what lay beyond was thin, like ice over deep water. And they sought not to break it, but to look through it. Some claimed they succeeded. One journal, later recovered from the ruins, speaks of a light that hums without warmth, of shadows that echo when touched. It is difficult to know what to make of these writings. They could be metaphor or madness. But what they reveal, unmistakably, is the mindset of a city that believed knowledge was not a limit, but an invitation. The people of Winterhold watched these mages with reverence and fear. They called them sky watchers, and when storms gathered above the sea, they would look to the college to see whether the lights had changed. The farmers and sailors, in their simple wisdom, understood something that the scholars often forgot: that every act of understanding changes what is understood. The more the mages studied the heavens, the more the heavens seemed to shift. Colors deepened, patterns fractured, the auroras began to appear even at midday. It was beautiful and unnatural. But who among them could resist beauty? Not the mages, not the city, not even the sea. One scholar, whose name the ice has preserved in fragments, wrote in her diary, "We do not worship the sky, but we cannot help loving it. Each time it moves, it feels as though it remembers us. And I wonder, if the day ever comes when it looks back for too long, will we survive its gaze? That question would become prophecy, though no one knew it yet. As the years passed, the college grew bolder. They built spires taller than any cathedral in Skyrim. At their peak, these towers were fitted with enchanted lenses, glass so pure that it bent not only light but will. The scholars used them to focus auroral energy, to study the threads of magicka that hung between the stars. For the first time, they glimpsed what they believed to be the skeleton of the cosmos. Lines of power woven through reality itself. They called it the ethereal grid. Others called it blasphemy. But to the college, it was revelation. They believed they were reading the notes of creation itself. Here the tone of their writings shifts. The early journals spoke with humility, observing, describing, wondering. But later entries begin to command. They no longer write, "We saw," but "we shaped." No longer "we learned," but "we achieved." The verbs harden. The language becomes less a record and more a declaration. It is a small change, and yet, in history, small changes are often the first cracks. They had begun to believe they could perfect what already was. And the sky, vast, silent, endless, remained patient as they tried. The Stoics wrote that arrogance is not born from strength, but from fear. Fear that one's efforts may never be enough. Winterhold scholars were brilliant, but they were also afraid of limitation, afraid of mortality, afraid that the universe might not notice their devotion. And so they built higher, reached further, hoping that if they climbed far enough into the light would look back. Some say it did. That one night the sky opened, not in wrath, but in recognition. But that story belongs to another part. For now, we linger in the quiet before understanding breaks. Stand again on that bridge, the one that leads to the college, the one that hums softly beneath your feet. Look up. The auroras shift like breath across glass. Every color has a sound, and if you listen closely, you might hear the faint music of a city still learning to dream. This was Winterhold before the fall, a city that spoke with the sky and believed it was being answered, a people who mistook reflection for revelation, and a college that, in trying to read the world, forgot that the world was already reading them, the storms of the north. It began with the wind. At first, no one noticed. In Winterhold, the wind is a constant companion, sharp, uninvited, relentless. It carries the taste of salt and frost. It sculpts the cliffs like a patient sculptor working in ice. But one winter, something changed. The wind no longer sang in one voice. It began to whisper. Sailors were the first to sense it. They spoke of currents that defied their charts, of waves that rose without moon or warning. Their ships groaned in harbors that had once been calm, and ropes snapped not from storm, but from stillness, a stillness heavy as thought. To the scholars of the college, these reports were data. To the people of Winterhold, they were omen. And between those two interpretations, the city began to divide. The first sign. One morning, the fishermen found the sea black, not in color, but in weight, as though the light had forgotten how to live on its surface. It reflected nothing. Even the sky seemed to retreat. For 3 days, no one left the docks. When the sun finally returned, it rose twice, once in the east, and again, faintly, beneath the water. The mages explained it as refraction, the bending of light through new layers of salt and ice. They wrote essays about atmospheric density and magical interference. But the dock workers told another story, that the sea had opened its eyes. And perhaps both were true. Based on later fragments of journals recovered from the college, it seems that some experiments were indeed conducted around this time. Attempts to measure the flow of magicka through seawater, to trace how the world's energy moved beneath the ice. These writings are careful, scientific, but between their lines you can feel hesitation. Words scratched out, pages half burned, as though the scholars themselves were afraid of what they had begun to understand. The snow that moved against the wind. Then came the snow, not falling from the sky, but rising from the ground. Witnesses described drifts that seemed to breathe, flakes moving in strange, deliberate spirals. When touched, they melted not into water, but into light, brief, blue, and cold as guilt. The mages studied it, of course. They collected samples in glass vials, comparing it to the ice crystals that formed near the ruins of Sarthal. Their notes speak of resonance, of frost infused with traces of unstable magicka. The phenomenon, they concluded, was harmless, transient, a curiosity. But to the villagers, it was the first clear message. Something beneath their feet had begun to turn. The banners of the sky. Winterhold's sky had always been restless, but that year it became something else entirely. Auroras no longer appeared at night. They lingered even under daylight. Bands of green and violet rippled across the horizon, pulsing like the breath of some invisible creature. The people began calling them banners of the sky, and though they were beautiful, beauty in the north has never been a comfort. Children grew ill when they stared too long. Crops withered without reason. Metal tools left outside overnight began to hum, and every morning the ocean crept a little closer to the cliffs. The mages said the land was shifting. The priests said the gods were whispering. The sailors said nothing at all. The silence before the banners broke. It was then that the storms began, not the wild, blinding blizzards that Skyrim is known for, but long, slow tempests of unnatural rhythm. The wind would rise and fall like breath, the snow turning to rain mid-air, then back again before touching ground. Thunder came without lightning. Lightning struck without sound, and in those pauses, a stillness settled over the city, so complete that people swore they could hear the frost itself forming. Windows frosted from the inside. Candles refused to burn straight. Dogs would not howl. Inside the college, the tone changed. Debate turned to urgency, and urgency to fear. The scholars gathered nightly in the Hall of the Elements, reading from scrolls and journals as if the answers could be conjured by repetition. Some argued that the weather was natural, the sea reclaiming its due. Others whispered of instability in the fabric of magicka itself. One apprentice wrote in his diary, "The air feels thin, not as though we cannot breathe it, but as though it no longer wishes to breathe us." He was found days later, frozen on the parapet, his hand outstretched toward the aurora, his eyes reflecting it perfectly. The division of belief. The city below had begun to lose faith in its scholars. The people wanted prayers, not proofs, but the mages offered no comfort, only calculations. When the Jarl demanded an explanation, the Archmage answered simply, "The sky does not answer to thrones." The remark spread through the city like fire through dry pine. Markets fell silent. Merchants refused to trade with the college. For the first time, Winterhold stood as two cities, one built on stone, the other on certainty. Neither would survive the other's fall. The Stoics' observation. In the margins of a ruined text, a volume of meditations on the mundus found centuries later, a line was scribbled in small trembling ink. The storm is not punishment, it is conversation. Perhaps that was the truth of it. The sea, the wind, the sky, they were not acting against Winterhold. They were responding, reflecting back the city's own unrest. For the Stoics, harmony with nature was the highest good, and here, in the far north, that harmony had fractured. The city sought to command the world. The world replied in its native tongue, not with anger, but with demonstration, When the wind stripped roofs and the frost split stone, it was not vengeance, it was proof that nothing built upon resistance lasts. The day the wind stopped. One dawn, the air went completely still. No sound of waves, no rustle of banners, no breath of life. It lasted for only a minute, and yet those who lived through it said it felt like the longest silence they had ever known. Then the sea sighed, and the world moved again. But that minute became legend. They called it the holding of breath. And though no one knew it then, that silence marked the beginning of the end. The storms of the north. The seasons that followed were madness. Winter no longer arrived in patterns. It came and went as it pleased. Days of sunlight would burn through snow, only for the frost to return before nightfall. Ships vanished in calm water, their masts later found drifting upside down. Birds flew inland and did not return. The people began to dream of waves breaking in the streets. The mages continued their work, but something in their eyes had changed. They spoke less of understanding and more of endurance. Their voices grew quieter, their steps heavier. The arrogance of discovery had given way to the fatigue of survival. And above it all, the aurora continued to dance, as bright and beautiful as ever, unmoved by the suffering below. It shimmered in greens and blues that no longer felt real, a cold theater above a dying stage. The storms would continue for another decade before the collapse. They would shape the cliffs, erode the docks, bury the libraries under layers of salt and frost. And still the city held on, too proud to flee, too curious to stop watching. In time, they would come to call that era the Whispering Years, because even as the world fell apart, the people of Winterhold believed they could listen their way back to understanding. But the sea, as ever, speaks a language without mercy. If you stand today at the edge of the ruins, you can still hear it, that rhythm of wind and water, the endless argument between sky and stone. It is not a roar anymore, only a hum, as though the world remembers what it tried to say, but no longer feels the need to repeat it. The storms have passed, but their shape remains. Every ruined wall, every hollow tower is a syllable in the long sentence of consequence. Winterhold learned too late what the Stoics had always known, that the universe is not cruel, only consistent. And that knowledge, when forced against nature, will eventually collapse under the weight of its own certainty. The whispering ice. When the last of the great storms broke, the stillness that followed was stranger than the noise that had come before. For weeks, the sky above Winterhold remained clear, too clear. No clouds, no movement, no wind. The sea lay still as stone, its surface a single sheet of gray glass. It should have been peace, but it was not. The stillness carried weight, like a question that refused to be asked aloud. Then, one morning, the ice began to whisper. The first sound. It started near the docks, or what remained of them. A faint hum beneath the frost, low and constant, like the vibration of a distant bell. At first, the fishermen thought it was wind, trapped beneath the frozen surface. But there was no wind. The sound did not fade. It moved. They said it slid under their boots, followed them home, settled into the corners of their houses like a breath that refused to leave. And when night came, it changed. The hum turned to a whisper, not words, just a rhythm, a pattern. Some said it sounded like chanting, others like the turning of pages in a great invisible book, the Bomtuntia, scholars' theory. The college took notice, of course. Mages gathered samples of the ice, cutting it from the sea's surface and placing it into sealed containers. They examined its texture, its glow, its faint pulse. Because yes, when held against the light, the ice pulsed as if a heart had been trapped inside. The scholars wrote about resonant magica crystallization, the natural echo of energy trapped in sub-zero conditions. They theorized that the storms had infused the sea with unstable arcane residue, causing the frozen layer to act like a vast instrument, a harp played by temperature and time. It was a beautiful explanation, and for a while it was enough. But there was one problem. The whispers did not remain under the ice. They began to travel inland. The voice beneath the cliff. Miners working near the old North Ridge reported that when they struck the rock, they heard echoes that did not match their own rhythm. The sound seemed to answer them, delayed, thoughtful, alive. The college sent a team of mages to investigate. They lowered a crystal sphere into a fissure along the cliff, its enchantments designed to record vibration. When they pulled it back hours later, they found it faintly glowing. The pattern of the glow was not random. It formed circles, overlapping, symmetrical, deliberate. One scholar, whose name has been lost to time, believed the pattern mirrored certain tonal diagrams found in ancient Dwemer manuscripts. If that is true, and the resemblance is undeniable, then the implication is unsettling, that the sound beneath the ice was not mere resonance, but language. Still, the Archmage forbade further study. Not everything that answers, he said, is waiting for a question. The people's fear. While the college debated, the people began to break. At night, the whispers grew louder. Some claimed to hear voices calling their names. Others swore the ice repeated things they had said in secret. Fishermen refused to go near the shore. Children were kept indoors. Doors were sealed, not against cold, but against echo. And yet, in the way of all tragedies, familiarity dulls fear. After a while, people learned to live with the whispers. They slept to them, worked to them, even spoke over them as one speaks over the sound of rain. The extraordinary became background noise. It is human nature to adapt, even to the unnatural. The Stoics would have seen in that adaptation a quiet kind of wisdom, a reminder that peace is not the absence of disturbance, but the acceptance of it. The frozen library weeks passed before anyone realized that the ice was spreading inland. The harbor froze first, then the lower streets. Thin layers formed over stone, transparent but unbreakable. It grew not from weather, but from memory, covering places where the storms had once struck hardest. Scholars noticed that beneath each frozen surface, faint images shimmered, shapes like writing, but too fluid to be read. A rumor spread through the city that the ice was remembering. The college, unwilling to believe superstition, attempted to melt a section for study. They succeeded, partially. When the ice broke, the air filled with sound, a deep, low tone that rattled through the foundations of the Hall of the Elements. Candles went out, books fell from shelves. And when the echo faded, every mage present felt the same thing, a strange, sudden calm. One described it later as being looked at by nothing. They never tried again. The philosophy of frost. From this time come some of the most haunting fragments of writing in Winterhold's history. Diaries, notes, marginalia left behind by both scholars and citizens. They speak not of terror, but of understanding. A slow realization that the city was becoming something else, less a place, more a memory of a place. A transformation not of destruction, but of return. One scholar wrote, "Perhaps the ice is not punishment. Perhaps it is preservation. The world freezing itself at the moment before collapse, to remember what it loved." In these words, the Stoic tone emerges again. The acceptance of what cannot be changed, the courage to see meaning in what remains. Even as the city began to disappear beneath its own reflection, some found peace in knowing that beauty does not end, it only changes form. The Song of the Frozen Bells. One evening, a group of travelers reported hearing bells ringing from beneath the bay. They said the sound was faint but unmistakable, a melody of 3 tones repeating in perfect measure. The priests claimed it was the spirits of the drowned. The mages argued it was a harmonic echo from the structures that had fallen during the storms. But among the common folk, a simpler belief took hold, that the sea was mourning for what it had taken. Even now, in the rare moments when the wind falls silent, people who wander near the ruins claim to hear it. Not the ringing of metal, but the soft vibration of forgiveness. A resonance without direction. A mercy without speaker. The scholar who stayed. When the college began to empty, students fleeing south, teachers resigning, archives abandoned, one scholar chose to remain. Her name was Solana. She was young, quiet, and known for writing more than she spoke. In her final entry, discovered centuries later in a block of ice perfectly preserved, she wrote, "I have stopped seeking causes. The ice is not cruel, it is listening. And I think it is learning our shape so it can carry us more faithfully into silence." After that, there are no more words, only the impression of her hand pressed lightly against the page, as though she had been touching something unseen. The ice as mur, memory turung, divers exploring the remains of Winterhold report strange things beneath the water, echoes that follow their movements, reflections that do not match their gestures, and once, a voice that repeated a phrase only after the diver had returned to the surface. It said simply, "We are still here." Perhaps it was the wind. Perhaps it was something else. But based on known phenomena of magica resonance and ancient tonal architecture, it could be said that Winterhold's ruin has become its own instrument, a frozen archive humming with the memory of its fall. When the Stoics wrote of living according to nature, they could not have imagined such a thing, a city in harmony with its own destruction. And yet, that is what Winterhold had become, a monument to acceptance, a frozen meditation on impermanence. The calm that followed. Years later, travelers found the city half buried in frost, its structures intact but lifeless, its silence total. They reported that even their own voices seemed dulled, as if the air refused to carry sound. One described it best. It felt like the world had inhaled and forgotten to exhale. No more whispers, no more hum, just stillness. The quiet perfection of what no longer needs to move. It is said that if you touch the ice on a still night, you can feel vibration deep within it, slow, steady, like a sleeping heart. Perhaps the city still dreams beneath its frozen skin. Perhaps it remembers what warmth felt like. Or perhaps, as Solana wrote, it simply learned how to carry silence well. Winterhold's story did not end in fire or wrath. It ended in listening. The world spoke, and for once, humanity was quiet enough to hear it. And maybe that, in the end, was the only kind of forgiveness the sea ever intended to give. The Great Collapse. It happened at night, not with warning, not with thunder, not with fire, just a quiet fracture that no one heard in time. The wind that day had been still, the sea glass smooth. From the highest tower of the college, you could see the auroras hanging motionless, frozen ribbons of light, as if the heavens themselves were holding their breath. And then, the world exhaled. The first crack. It began with a sound too deep for ears, a vibration felt through the soles of the feet, as if the land itself had remembered an old promise. The ice on the harbor shuddered, walls trembled like skin catching chill. Books slid from tables, candles bent sideways, and every raven in the city took flight at once. The people of Winterhold looked up, expecting storm, expecting wind, but the sky was perfectly clear. The first building fell without a scream. Its foundation sank, its walls sighed, and it was gone, swallowed whole by the sea below, leaving only the faint hiss of salt meeting flame. Within minutes, The docks followed. Wood cracked like splitting bone. A merchant ship, still tethered to its post, tilted forward and vanished, its lantern flickering once, then extinguished beneath the waves. The ground groaned, streets twisted, the sea, silent for years, finally spoke, a long, low roar that seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere at once. The collapse begins. The people ran, but there was nowhere to go. The cliffs themselves were falling. Stone peeled away like bark, and the edge of the city slid forward, not crumbling, but flowing, like sand through unseen fingers. Each house fell with the grace of something returning to its element. From the college, the view was unbearable. The scholars watched from the bridge as the city they had sworn to protect disappeared in slow motion. They called out spells, incantations meant to bind the earth, to hold back the sea. None of them worked. Some spells fizzled in the air, others erupted too powerfully, turning to flame or ice in their hands. The magicka in the air was unstable, reverberating like a struck bell. One mage shouted, "It's answering us! It's responding!" And perhaps that was true. The sea, the wind, the sky, all moved now with an intelligence that felt familiar, as if the world had learned to speak in the same language the college once used to command it. The bridge shook. Cracks spread like veins of light beneath the mages' feet. Half of them turned back, half stayed. Some whispered prayers, some took notes. All of them knew, even then, that history was being written in real time, and that they were inside its sentence. The descent of light eyewitnesses, the few who lived, described what came next in conflicting ways. Some said the auroras collapsed, that the sky itself fell like a curtain of color. Others said the light rose from the sea, pouring upward like a reversed waterfall. Perhaps both were true, for in that moment, sky and sea became indistinguishable. The horizon disappeared, light folded upon itself, white and violet and blue, and within it, shadows moved. Not human, not divine, just forms, like thoughts made visible for a second before dissolving again. Those who saw it lost all sense of sound. Their memories of that night are written without verbs, only images, as if language itself had frozen mid-breath. A scholar named Darren wrote later with shaking hand, "The light was not fire, it was memory, and it remembered more than we could bear." The sea claims its own. By dawn, half the city was gone. The lower districts, the docks, the merchants' quarters, all erased. The water line had moved inward by miles. What remained of the cliff stood jagged and raw, as though the land had been bitten clean through. The college still stood. Its bridge, though cracked and trembling, had not fallen. Its towers swayed but held. To many, that survival was miracle. To others, it was proof of guilt. Survivors stumbled through the ruins, their voices hoarse from shouting names that would never answer. Some looked toward the college with hope, others with hatred, but the mages themselves had gone silent. They moved through the halls like ghosts, carrying water to the wounded, burning scrolls that might have caused more harm if left behind. Their pride was gone. Only purpose remained. The long night, when night returned, the auroras did not. The sky was black and bare. Only the stars remained, and even they seemed hesitant to shine. The sea below glowed faintly, an eerie phosphorescence, as if it had swallowed too much light and was slowly digesting it. In the Hall of the Elements, the surviving mages gathered around a single candle. No spells were cast that night, no debates held. They sat in silence, listening to the faint sound of dripping water from the ceiling. For the first time in its history, the College of Winterhold was quiet. One of them, an older scholar named Malrin, spoke after many hours. Perhaps the sea did not take the city. Perhaps it returned it. We have been speaking too long. The world has only replied in kind. No one argued. The morning after. At sunrise, the survivors looked upon what was left. Half the college's outer wall had collapsed, but the main hall stood untouched. The city below was gone, a single plateau where homes and streets had been, ending abruptly in a cliff of ice and water. The air was unnaturally warm. Birds circled above the void, calling to nests that no longer existed. The Jarl was dead. The archives were gone. The docks were a graveyard of masts. Only the college remained. And in that survival there was irony. The one place accused of arrogance was the only thing left to bear witness. The aftermath of faith. In the weeks that followed, Winterhold became less a city than a pilgrimage. Travelers came from across Skyrim to see the ruin, to walk the edges of what had fallen, to stand before the cliffs and listen for what the sea might still be saying. Priests called it divine punishment. Scholars called it natural correction. Poets called it truth. And all of them were right in their own way. For the collapse was not singular. It was not one event, but a meeting point, where pride met consequence, where curiosity met silence, and where understanding learned the cost of its own hunger. The Stoics would have seen in it not tragedy, but law, that everything returns to its origin, and that even the greatest of human creations must someday dissolve back into the elements that built it. The silence of the survivors. In the months that followed, many left. Some traveled south to Windhelm, some to Dawnstar. A few stayed behind, those who could not bear to abandon what they loved or what they had lost. They lived quietly among the ruins, their homes rebuilt from fallen stone. When asked why they remained, they always gave the same answer: because something here is still listening. Perhaps they were right. Even now, the cliffs hum faintly at night, a low vibration that moves through the bones if you stand still enough to feel it. Some call it wind, others call it memory. And maybe it is both, for memory is just wind that has learned to take shape. The reflection of the sea. Years later, when the snow melted for a single season, travelers reported seeing strange shapes beneath the surface of the water: arches, stairways, the faint curve of rooftops. And in that reflection, a strange illusion appeared. The city restored, whole and untouched, just below the waves. It lasted only minutes before the fog returned, but in that fleeting vision, Winterhold seemed eternal. Neither gone nor alive, simply remembered, as all things are remembered, by the patience of water. The Stoic lesson. The philosophers who later studied the collapse found no single explanation that satisfied all minds. The earth shifted, the sea rose, the magic of the college misfired, all of it true, and yet none of it complete. The Stoics, had they stood upon those cliffs, would have said something simpler: what falls, falls by its nature, and nature does not apologize. There is no malice in erosion, no cruelty in consequence, only balance returning to itself. And so the collapse, terrible as it was also pure. It ended what could no longer endure. It erased the false and preserved the necessary. It gave silence back to a city that had forgotten how to be quiet. The city beneath the sea, a centuries later, divers still find fragments: a candle holder fused to coral, a book frozen into a single page, a staircase leading nowhere. When they touch these things, the water around them vibrates faintly, as though the city still breathes. Some say the hum beneath the cliffs is the last spell ever cast by the college, a ward not to protect, but to remember. A spell of stillness meant to keep Winterhold from ever being truly lost. A prayer written in silence. And if you listen carefully, the sea will tell you the same story again and again, in every wave that breaks against the ice, that nothing once understood is ever really gone. Winterhold did not end. It transformed. From city to ruin, from noise to thought, from certainty to wisdom. The world did not destroy it. It completed it. And perhaps that is the truest kind of salvation. The survivors, in the months after the collapse, Winterhold ceased to be a city. It became a memory carried by those who refused to leave. The air grew thin, the wind colder, and the silence between the cliffs heavier than snow. Yet somehow life persisted, not in abundance, not in the bustling rhythm of trade or laughter, but in the quiet, deliberate act of continuing. The survivors moved through the ruins like people inside a dream they could not wake from. They spoke less, they worked slower. Even grief became measured, a rhythm learned from the sea that had taken half of them away. The few who stayed most fled south to Windhelm or Dawnstar. They took with them what little could be carried: food, blankets, stories. Those who remained were few: old fishermen, widows, a handful of guards, and mages who had lost both purpose and pride. They did not stay for hope. They stayed because leaving felt like betrayal. The city had been everything: teacher, tormentor, home. To abandon it would be to admit it had meant nothing. So they built their fires against the ruined walls. They patched holes with driftwood and faith. And when night fell, they sat close, listening for sounds that might still belong to the world. The wind no longer howled, it whispered. The sea no longer roared, it breathed. One fisherman, old enough to have seen both the beginning and the end, said, "It feels as if the land itself is thinking." And we are what it remembers. The college. After the fall, within the college, the survivors fared little better. The bridge that once hummed with magic was now silent, its runes dim to dull gray. The great hall of the elements had lost its symmetry. One side cracked open, exposing the sky. Snow fell freely onto the marble floor where scholars once debated truth. The mages who remained no longer spoke of discovery. They spoke of endurance. They repaired what they could, sealed what they couldn't, and learned to live with the ruin. There was no more teaching, no more experiments, only the daily ritual of keeping the fire lit. For the first time, the college became truly humble. The walls, the towers, the silence, all seemed to be teaching a new kind of lesson, that wisdom is not expansion, but reduction, that to know less, honestly, quietly, is sometimes to understand more. The new lessons. In time, a new discipline emerged within the college, not a branch of magic, but of thought. They called it the study of stillness. It was born not from pride, but from surrender. Scholars would sit for hours before the cracks in the walls, watching the snow fall through the broken ceiling. They wrote nothing. They cast nothing. They simply watched. And in that watching, they began to notice things the old masters never had. The way frost formed patterns like constellations on the marble floor. The way light bent differently depending on breath. The subtle rhythm of the wind as it moved through shattered glass. They came to believe that magic was not a force to be summoned, but a language to be heard, that all along the world had been speaking, and humans, too loud in their certainty, had simply talked over it. A Stoic truth reawakened among them, that control is an illusion, and the truest form of mastery is harmony. The city below. Down among the ruins, life reshaped itself. The markets became gardens. The old tavern became a gathering hall. People began to measure their days not by coin or clock, but by light. The slow change of shadow along the cliffs, the return of the sun through clouds that had forgotten them for months. Children born after the collapse never knew Winterhold as it was. To them, the city had always been quiet. They played among the fallen stones, sliding down slopes of powdered snow, unaware that they were running across the roofs of buried homes. Their laughter echoed through hollow spaces, a fragile sound, but enough to make the place feel alive again. The elders watched them with a mix of joy and guilt. They saw in those children the city's forgiveness, proof that the future did not resent the past. The Stoic of the North among the remaining mages was one man often seen sitting alone on the edge of the broken bridge. His name was Terran, a scholar of alteration once known for his impatience with uncertainty. After the collapse, he spoke to no one. Each morning he would bring a single chair to the bridge, place it at the edge where the stone ended and air began, and sit for hours staring at the sea. Some thought he waited for the city to rise again. Others said he was listening. Years later, his journals were found. Only fragments survived, but one page remains clear. To change the world is to misunderstand it. The world changes itself. We are here to witness, not to correct. His students, what few remained, took his words to heart. They began to practice what they called the art of witnessing, a discipline of attention, not action. It became the guiding philosophy of the new college. The seasons returned as years passed, the storms faded. The sea grew calmer, the auroras returned, dimmer, gentler, as if humbled by what they had seen. Snow fell with its old rhythm again, and with it came something unexpected. Green. Tiny patches of moss began to grow along the cliffs. The cracks in the college walls filled with life, small and stubborn. Nature, unbothered by human ruin, had resumed its quiet work. The mages saw this not as miracle, but as correction. They began to record the growth patterns of the moss, the way frost and sunlight balanced across stone. Some called it botany. Others called it penance. But it was study all the same, a softer, slower pursuit, born of respect rather than conquest, the city without anger. It is said that after the collapse, no one in Winterhold ever raised their voice again. Not in argument, not in grief. Even disputes were handled in whispers. The people believed that the air still remembered the storms, that loud words might wake the past. Whether this was superstition or wisdom no longer matters. What matters is that it worked. The city learned peace, not from decree, but from necessity. And in that peace, something sacred formed, a unity between survivors who had nothing left to divide them. They no longer called themselves citizens. They called themselves keepers, those who remain to tend what time forgets. The college's vow. Years after the collapse, the archmage, now an old woman named Selvari, gathered the remaining scholars. Standing beneath the cracked dome of the Hall of the Elements, she spoke softly. We once believed that to learn was to rise above the world, but perhaps true learning is to sink, to go down, into humility, into silence, into the places where truth hides when we grow too proud to see it. The mages nodded, and so the college made its vow, never again to seek dominion, never again to treat magic as possession. From that day forward, their purpose was not to control the world, but to listen to it, to serve as translators of what already was. The bridge to the college, once a passage of ascent, became a place of meditation. Those who crossed it did so barefoot, in silence, feeling the hum of the stone beneath their steps, the faint, living pulse of what endured. The sea remembers. Sometimes, when the wind is still, those who live near the cliffs claim they can hear voices beneath the water. Not cries, never cries, but the soft murmur of conversation. Perhaps it is only the sea against the rocks. Perhaps it is the memory of those who refuse to leave. Either way, it is gentle. The survivors learned to stop fearing the sound. They began to speak to it, not asking for forgiveness, but offering gratitude for what was taken, for what remained, for the chance to begin again. It is said that in Winterhold, even the waves bow slightly before reaching shore, the Stoic city. Centuries later, travelers would call Winterhold the Stoic city, a place where the world feels slower, where speech feels unnecessary. They would walk its narrow paths and say they felt smaller and yet more complete. And that, perhaps, is the greatest legacy of the survivors. They turned ruin into reflection. They built no monuments, no statues, no new walls. They built stillness, and in that stillness, meaning. The Stoics wrote, "A man is not destroyed by what happens to him, but by how he reacts to it." Winterhold proved this true. The city was destroyed, and yet, somehow, it was not. Epilogue. Within the living. As decades passed, the world forgot, but Winterhold did not. It became a place of pilgrimage for those who sought quiet, for those who wished to see what humility looks like in stone. The college reopened, not as a fortress of knowledge, but as a sanctuary for listening. The survivors grew old, their children grew into calmness, and when they too began to vanish, the sea did not rage. It simply absorbed their absence as it had absorbed everything else, without malice, without noise, without end. To stand in Winterhold now is to stand inside a lesson written by the universe itself, a lesson about limits, about listening, about how even the end can be gentle if one accepts it fully. The survivors did not rebuild the city, they became it, and in doing so, they ensured that it would never fall again. The accusation. The wind had returned to Winterhold, but it no longer screamed. It moved through the broken streets softly now, like a breath through a hollow flute. It carried no snow, no sea spray, only voices. The kind of voices that belong to memory, to guilt, to the quiet arguments that never find their answer. The collapse had ended, but its shadow lingered, not in the sea, not in the ruins, but in the hearts of those who survived. Because silence, when shared between the wronged and the accused, is never peace. It is a wound that refuses to close. The first question. It began, as these things often do, with a question spoken aloud by someone too tired to be polite. A fisherman, his hands torn and scarred from rebuilding nets that had no sea left to feed them, stood before the college gate and asked, "Why did your walls not fall when ours did?" It was not accusation at first, just bewilderment, but in the way of truth, bewilderment always becomes blame. The archmage, a woman whose face had aged 10 years in one winter, had no answer. She only said what was true. We do not know. But truth, when spoken without comfort, sounds like arrogance. The fisherman spat on the snow and turned away. His words would echo through Winterhold for years to come. The divided town. The survivors who had stayed now began to divide again. Those who lived among the ruins blamed those who lived in the tower. The mages, in their silence, appeared guilty. The citizens, in their grief, appeared cruel. And between them, the bridge stood, a narrow line of stone stretching over nothing, like the last fragile connection between reason and resentment. At night, the villagers gathered around fires, whispering stories that grew heavier with each retelling. They said the mages had angered the gods, that their experiments had hollowed the cliffs, that the collapse was not accident but consequence. In the tavern that still stood, someone carved into the wood of a table, "Knowledge sinks what faith cannot." The mages never came to erase it. The silence of the college. Inside the college, the atmosphere was equally heavy. They no longer taught. No new students came. The libraries had become places of mourning. Rows of books no one dared to open. Every page felt dangerous, as if reading the wrong spell might summon the past again. They tried to explain once. They sent envoys to the people below to share their findings, geological shifts, arcane disturbances, the theory that the collapse had been the result of unstable ley lines beneath the coast. But no one listened. When a mind has lost everything, reason is not consolation. It is insult. So the college closed its doors again, and the silence between the two halves of Winterhold became the city's truest border. The trial without court. In time, the word trial began to appear in whispers. Not a formal one. No Jarl remained, no court, no law. But the people wanted judgment, wanted confession. Not to punish, but to make meaning from the senseless. A delegation of villagers, led by an old sailor named Bren, walked to the bridge one morning carrying nothing but questions. The Archmage met them halfway. They spoke for hours. No one shouted, no one cried, but the words cut deep. Bren said, "You took from the sea its stillness, and the sea took it back. But why must we pay the price for your hunger?" The Archmage, tired and hollow-eyed, answered, "We did not command the sea, we only listened. Perhaps we listened too closely." Bren frowned. "Then what are you now, listeners or liars?" The Archmage did not answer, because in that moment she realized even she no longer knew. The broken bridge. A month later, the bridge cracked. Not fully, not enough to fall, but enough to make crossing it dangerous. The people took it as a sign. The college saw it as truth. From that day on, the mages rarely ventured beyond their walls. They tended to the wounded who came seeking help, but never left their sanctuary. They did not seek forgiveness, nor deny the blame. They lived between both, a purgatory of intellect, enduring the consequences of curiosity. And in that exile, they began to change. They stopped writing about discovery. They wrote about restraint. They stopped pursuing power. They pursued understanding. Slowly, their arrogance eroded like cliffs in rain. The philosophy of blame. Among the scholars, a new debate began, not about the collapse, but about guilt itself. One young mage named Valen wrote, "Guilt is pride inverted. It is the belief that one's actions are powerful enough to disrupt the natural order of the world. But nature does not blame. It only balances." His writings were controversial. The older mages rejected them at first, saying it was cowardice disguised as philosophy. But over time, his words began to spread. Because they carried something no one had felt in years, relief. Perhaps they were not monsters. Perhaps they were simply witnesses to something the world had already decided would happen. Perhaps their role had never been to prevent the collapse, but to remember it. The visit of the priests. In the third year after the collapse, a group of priests from the Temple of Mara arrived from Windhelm. They brought gifts of bread, salt, and silence. They said they came not to judge, but to bless what remained. They walked through the ruins, placing small candles in the cracks of fallen homes, murmuring words that sounded more like apologies than prayers. When they reached the college, they found the Archmage waiting at the gate. She said, "Do not bless us. Bless the sea instead." The priests bowed. They understood. Some truths do not need sermons, only acknowledgement. The Stoic understanding. By the 5th year, the anger had begun to fade. It was not forgiveness, not yet, but fatigue. The people had learned that hatred is heavy, and that carrying it into each new winter is a kind of self-inflicted ruin. One day, the same fisherman who had once asked, "Why did your walls not fall when ours did?" returned to the college. He was older now, slower. He came not to accuse, but to ask again, this time softly, "Do you think the sea remembers?" The Archmage, even older now, smiled faintly. The sea remembers everything, but it does not hold grudges. The man nodded, and for the first time in years, there was peace between them. The college's reflection. In later writings from this period, the mages described the years after the collapse as the quiet reconstruction, not of stone, but of self. They began restoring only what could be restored and letting go of what could not. A library half buried in ice was left untouched, a deliberate monument to humility. Each ruined room became a lesson, each silence a text. They no longer sought to prove innocence, for innocence is irrelevant to nature. Instead, they sought to live in accordance with consequence. A Stoic line found carved into the wall of the Archmage's study reads, "We are not punished for pride, we are completed by it." And in that strange acceptance, they found a kind of freedom. The City of Two Truths. So Winterhold lived on, divided but at peace with its division. The villagers below and the scholars above spoke rarely, but when they did, it was without anger. Each side had its truth, and both were right. The people believed the mages had brought ruin. The mages believed the ruin had brought wisdom. And between them, the sea, eternal and unbothered, reflected both faces back with equal calm. That, perhaps, is the closest thing to justice the world ever gives. The Stoic lesson. If there is a moral to the collapse, and to the quiet years that followed, it is this: knowledge and humility must live side by side, or both will drown. The mages learned to think less loudly. The people learned to question without rage. And together they built something stronger than forgiveness: understanding. For forgiveness demands that someone be wrong. Understanding only requires that both survive. The accusation did not end with verdict. It ended with stillness. And in that stillness, Winterhold became whole again, not as it was, but as it should have been, a city that listens and a people who no longer fear the sound of truth. The rebuilding of silence. The sea had claimed its due, the storms had spoken their truth, and the wind had grown tired of anger. What remained in Winterhold was not ruin anymore, but a strange, weightless quiet. The kind of quiet that follows understanding. The world had not forgiven Winterhold, but it had stopped opposing it, and that was enough. The work of small hands rebuilding began not with plans or proclamations, but with gestures so small they almost went unnoticed. An old woman, once a trader, began sweeping the snow from the old marketplace each morning, even though there were no stalls left to tend. A boy, barely 12, started clearing the ice from broken steps near the harbor. A group of sailors, returning from Windhelm, brought back a single plank of wood each trip. For the docks, they said, though there was no dock left to rebuild. No one commanded them. No one called it rebuilding. It was simply what people do when grief begins to soften. They make space again for meaning. The college, too, joined quietly. Mages lent their light to melt the ice, not as spellwork, but as service. They worked beside fishermen, silent and equal, their robes no longer marking rank, but recognition. The world did not need new walls. It needed gentleness. And so, brick by brick, act by act, Winterhold began to breathe again. The rebirth of the college. The College of Winterhold did not restore its towers to their former glory. It refused to. Instead, it left cracks visible, let the wind move through its halls, allowed time to be part of its architecture. A new kind of study took root, not of dominance, but of dialogue. Students, few though they were taught first not to cast spells, but to listen to the world. The first lesson of the new college was not arcane, it was silence, a full hour of it. Each morning the apprentices sat upon the frost-worn floor of the Hall of the Elements, eyes closed, listening to the sound of the sea below the cliffs. Some heard waves, some heard nothing. But over time, they learned that both were answers. The Archmage wrote in the margins of the college's new charter, "Before you speak the language of the world, learn its pauses." The architecture of stillness. As the years passed, Winterhold became something new. A city rebuilt not of ambition, but of reflection. Where towers once reached upward, gardens now spread outward. Stone from fallen walls was used to build benches. Arches of driftwood framed new courtyards where snow gathered in perfect silence. The air smelled of salt, old parchment, and pine. The college library was partially restored, but without doors. Knowledge, said one scholar, should not need permission to enter. And so the pages of new journals fluttered open in the wind, ink smudged by sea spray, their words unfinished, not errors, but invitations. No one hurried to finish anything anymore. Winterhold had learned that some questions are more beautiful unanswered. The philosophy of renewal. With time, scholars began to write again, not of power or elements, but of patience. A new school of thought emerged, quietly and without name, focused on the rhythm of recovery. They wrote about how destruction reshapes perception, how silence can be a form of teaching. One essay written by a young scholar named Lethan became central to this philosophy. He called it On Stillness After Storms. In it he wrote, "When the sea erased our city, it did not end our story. It merely rewrote it in a quieter hand. Silence is not the absence of knowledge. It is its completion." His words spread beyond the college. Travelers began to come, not seeking spells, but seeking stillness. They left offerings of ink and quills at the cliffside. Winterhold became a pilgrimage for the weary mind. The return of the bells. Years after the collapse, one of the priests from the Temple of Mara decided to rebuild the small chapel that had stood by the docks. Its foundation was gone, its bells swallowed by the sea. But he built it anyway, on higher ground this time, its stones lighter, its altar open to the wind. When the structure was complete, he did not hang new bells. Instead, he left an empty frame where they once had been. "Let the wind speak for them," he said. And it did. On calm days, nothing. On stormy ones, the frame sang, a low, haunting tone as air passed through its hollow metal. People began to gather there during twilight, not to pray, but to listen. Some called it the sound of the lost bells, others simply the breath of the city. To each listener, it said something different, but to all, it said enough. The sea's apology. Every spring, when the ice broke from the cliffs, the sea would leave offerings on the shore, bits of coral, fragments of pottery, a mirror frame, sometimes even a book wrapped in kelp. The people began to collect these things and place them on the cliffs as if returning them to the world. They called this ritual the sea's apology. No one believed the ocean meant remorse, but the act itself carried peace. A fisherman once said, "If the sea remembers, then we can forget." That became the city's unspoken motto. Not forgiveness, but release. The pilgrims in time, word of Winterhold's transformation spread beyond the holds of Skyrim. Travelers came, monks, wanderers, seekers, people haunted by their own collapses. They arrived in silence, often alone, and left the same way. They stayed for days or weeks, sleeping among the ruins, writing reflections on scraps of parchment left for the wind to scatter. It became tradition not to sign one's name, to let thought belong to the place rather than the person. The college welcomed them all, offering warmth, tea, and quiet conversation by candlelight. There were no sermons, no lessons, only listening. Winterhold had become not a city of mages, but a sanctuary for thought. The new bridge. When the old bridge finally fell, it did so gently. No collapse, no thunder, just a sigh of stone and the sound of waves rising to catch it. The mages did not rebuild it in stone. They rebuilt it in light. They wove an enchantment of pure energy, a narrow path of soft blue luminescence that stretched across the gulf between the cliffs and the college. It shimmered faintly, visible only at dawn and dusk, a bridge that could be crossed only by those who walked without haste. They named it the Path of Listening. And for the first time in centuries, the connection between the city and the college was restored, not by architecture, but by trust. The Stoic city restored. It was in those years that travelers began calling Winterhold the Stoic city, a place where no one hurried, where even the wind seemed thoughtful, a place where every ruin was left visible as reminder, as teacher. In the college courtyard stood a stone engraved with a single line, from the old philosophers of the South: "To live is to learn what can be lost, and to keep walking anyway." That, more than any magic, became Winterhold's power. The people of the city did not rebuild the past. They built something gentler, a future that no longer needed perfection. The Wanel Lesson. Years later, an aging scholar wrote, "We have learned that silence is not emptiness. It is fullness without noise." The city does not speak anymore because it no longer needs to explain itself. And perhaps that is the greatest kind of rebuilding there is, to restore not what was destroyed, but what was misunderstood. Winterhold, at last, was not a place of loss. It was a place of learning how to live with loss, and how, in that acceptance, to become unbreakable. The light over the sea. The sea is calm now. It has been calm for generations. The wind still carries the scent of salt and ice, but no longer the cry of loss. It moves softly through the ruins of Winterhold, whispering not in grief, but in remembrance. If you stand here at dusk, at the edge of the world, you can see everything that was and everything that remains. The cliffs are jagged still, the college stands, weathered, patient, and below, the scene shimmers in the fading light, reflecting the sky like an old memory rediscovered. And above it all, the auroras return. The lights remember. They move the same as they always have, slow, fluid, eternal, but there is something different now in their rhythm. They seem gentler, quieter, as if the sky itself has learned humility. Travelers come from across Skyrim to see them. They stand along the cliffs at midnight, wrapped in cloaks, eyes lifted to the heavens. No one speaks. There is no need to. The light says enough. The people call them the forgiving lights. But the mages say no. They are not forgiveness. They are memory. Memory without accusation, light without judgment. The sky has simply learned to reflect without expectation of being understood. The new Winterhold, what was once a city of pride and precision, is now a place of gentleness. The houses are few, low and rounded against the wind. Smoke rises thinly from chimneys built of sea stone and patience. The streets are paths of frost, lined with lanterns that burn a soft golden hue. No walls separate the people from the college anymore. There are no guards, no gates, only space and trust. Children play in the shadow of the college, their laughter carried into the hall of the elements, where scholars sit and smile without speaking. Sometimes a teacher will join them, tracing symbols in the snow, watching the wind erase them, and calling that lesson enough. The sea below. At low tide, you can still see the shapes of the old city beneath the waves. Broken arches, collapsed rooftops, the faint outline of streets that once led nowhere but down. The water here is strangely clear, as if the sea itself wishes to be transparent about what it holds. Fish swim through doorways, kelp curls around old staircases. And when sunlight passes through it just right, it looks as though the city has risen again, not as stone, but as reflection. The locals say the sea learned to carry the city the way the mind carries a dream, softly, endlessly, without letting it fade. Divers who descend into those depths report faint vibrations, the same old hum once heard in the ice, a tone too low to name, too steady to deny. Some say it's magica still moving through the bones of the city. Others say it's only water, remembering. But every sound there, every ripple, feels alive, like a thought the sea never stopped thinking. The college student, the College of Winterhold endures, a survivor of both arrogance and time. Its halls are smaller now, its lessons quieter. The new archmage teaches not power, but poise. Magic, she tells her students, is not the art of changing the world. It is the art of letting the world change you. No one laughs when she says it. They nod because here, in this city, such things are not metaphors. They are memory. The apprentices of this age begin their studies not with spells, but with silence. Each is asked to spend 7 days alone on the cliffs, to watch the sea and record only what it chooses to reveal. Most return with empty journals, and that, the Archmage says, is wisdom. The visitors. Pilgrims still come, monks from the south, bards from the west, wanderers from lands where the noise of life has grown unbearable. They come not seeking miracles, but the absence of them. They walk the ruins barefoot, feeling the cold stone underfoot like an old truth rediscovered. Some come to the temple by the sea, the one whose bells never ring, and sit in the open archway for hours, listening to the wind pass through the hollow frame. Each tone is different, because each listener hears it differently. Some say it sounds like a song, others a sigh, but all leave lighter than they arrived. And when they leave, they carry only silence, the kind that doesn't feel empty anymore. The city that does not speak. What makes Winterhold different now is not what it lost, but what it learned to stop demanding. The people do not chase prosperity, nor rebuild for grandeur. They keep their city small, their lives deliberate. They treat each day as a conversation with the elements, listening, adjusting, yielding. The mages work beside the fishermen, the priests beside the children. Even the sea is a citizen now. Its moods met not with fear, but with respect. At dawn, the horizon burns pale gold. At dusk, violet light folds over the cliffs. And each night, the auroras move like memory across the sky, slow, patient, infinite. Winterhold no longer prays for protection. It prays for awareness. And the difference, though subtle, is everything. The Stoic light. The philosophers who visit here say Winterhold is proof of a greater balance, that nothing truly ends. It merely changes its form, from sound to silence, from stone to story, from ruin to rhythm. One writer described it best. Winterhold is no longer a city. It is a breath that forgot to stop. And perhaps that is what all endurance becomes in the end, a quiet continuation, a calm refusal to vanish. The Stoics of old believed that the universe does not punish or reward, it only reflects. And standing here, on these cliffs where man once shouted at the heavens, one can feel that reflection returning, soft, kind, endless. Winterhold is not forgiven by the world. It is the world, learning to forgive itself. The children of the Quiet Age. The new generation grows without memory of the collapse. They hear the stories, but to them, they sound like myth. When they look at the sea, they do not see tragedy. They see beauty. They run across the same cliffs that once cracked and laugh without fear. And in that laughter, the ghosts of the past, the mages, the sailors, the scholars, find their rest. Because there is no greater proof of healing than the ability to play upon the wounds of history. Every few years, a child is born with an unusual gift, the ability to sense the resonance in the air, to hum in tune with the sound beneath the cliffs. The elders say these children carry the voice of the old college, but none call them chosen. Here, even magic is ordinary, and that is its highest honor. The light over the sea. At the end of each year, when the auroras burn their brightest, the people of Winterhold gather on the cliffs. They bring no offerings, no prayers, only lanterns, each one carved from thin ice, each one holding a single flame. They set them gently upon the sea. The lanterns drift outward, hundreds of small stars floating across the water until distance turns them to shimmer. No one speaks. They simply watch. The light touches the horizon, and for a moment the line between sky and sea disappears. It is said that in that moment, Winterhold is whole again. The city above and the city below, the living and the remembered, the noise and the silence, all one, reflected in a single breath of light. The ritual has no name. It needs none. The people call it the night the world looks back, the final reflection. If you ever find yourself standing on these cliffs, if the wind is still and the light soft, you might feel something stir within you. Not nostalgia, not sorrow, but recognition. Because Winterhold is not a place anymore. It is an understanding. A truth spoken without sound. That what falls can still endure. That what ends can still illuminate. That even silence, when accepted, can sing. And in that song, faint and endless, you might hear the last words the sea ever spoke to the city it once took away. Nothing was lost, only returned. Closing words. The lights fade, the sea breathes, the ruins rest, and above it all, the sky moves slowly, as it always has, as it always will. Winterhold endures, not in its stone, but in its stillness, not in its knowledge, but in its knowing how to let go. And if the gods ever look down again upon this frozen edge of the world, perhaps they will not see pride or ruin, only calm. A calm earned through understanding and held with grace, for the city that once tried to command the heavens has become the quiet reflection of them. And in that quiet, it is infinite. The library beneath the ice, it began with a sound, a faint knocking beneath the floor of the college, soft, rhythmic, and almost kind. For months, no one paid it attention. In Winterhold, the earth often groans. It is a language of its own. But one night, when the auroras burned so bright they turned the sea white, a student named Amran awoke to find frost blooming across the stone of the lower hall, not from cold but from direction. The ice was spreading inward. Its veins crawled along the cracks like handwriting. And if you listened closely, you could hear it humming. The descent. At dawn, a small group of scholars gathered. No one spoke. They followed the frost to where it thickened most, an old door half buried beneath debris, sealed since the collapse. They cleared it slowly, brushing away the dust of centuries, and when they opened it, the air that escaped was warm. Not the warmth of fire, but of breath, ancient and patient. Beyond the door lay a spiral staircase, descending into blue light. Walls of ice enclosed them, shimmering faintly, each layer holding fragments of trapped air like ghosts frozen mid-sentence. The deeper they went, the quieter the world became, until even their footsteps seemed to fall into stillness. At the bottom, they found the door. It was made not of wood or metal, but translucent crystal. Behind it, books, hundreds of them, stacked neatly, untouched. A library, preserved, impossible. The frozen library. When they entered, they expected ruin. Instead, they found order, Shelves stood straight, scrolls bound in perfect alignment. A single table occupied the center, its surface covered in thin frost that reflected light like calm water. Candles still sat in their holders, wicks blackened but intact, as though someone had just stepped away. It should not have been possible. The weight of the collapse should have crushed it. The cold should have shattered it. But the ice had sealed it in protection, not destruction. And as the scholars moved through it, they realized the air was not still. It was listening. Every whisper they made seemed to echo, not against walls, but within them. It felt as though the library remembered conversation and was waiting for it to begin again. The words of the lost. They began to read. The books were not about spells or rituals, but journals, personal writings from mages who had lived through the final years before the collapse. Their handwriting was precise, their thoughts unguarded. The first line they opened read, "The sky has grown too bright to study. I no longer write to remember. I write to understand why we cannot stop looking up." Another said, "If we fall, let it not be said that we were ignorant. Let it be said that we were curious beyond measure." And another, "We did not summon the sea. We summoned silence, and silence answered louder than any god." Each page was both confession and scripture, the intimate record of minds trying to make peace with consequence. There was no arrogance here, only fatigue and a strange, almost holy calm. The scholar's realization. As Amrin turned through those frozen pages, he noticed something else. Some words glowed faintly under the ice, ink preserved by magica residue, still pulsing after centuries. When he brushed them, they flickered, as if aware of being seen again. He copied one line into his notebook. "We thought to preserve knowledge, but perhaps knowledge preserves us." Later he wrote in his own hand, "Maybe this is what the sea left behind, not warning, not ruin, but memory with intention." The base of the library. Over the following weeks, the scholars returned often. They cataloged what they found not with greed, but reverence. The place was not meant to be studied. It was meant to be heard. Sometimes, when the wind outside grew still, they could hear faint murmurs within the ice. Not words, but the cadence of language, as if a conversation from another age was replaying itself through frozen air. One evening, as they sat reading, a single sound echoed through the chamber, a drop of water falling. It landed on the table, and where it touched, the ice rippled, not melting, but responding. The scholars froze, and in that heartbeat of silence, they heard something like a whisper. "We remember you." Then the room stilled again. They never heard it a second time, but none of them doubted what they had felt. The philosophy of preservation. The discovery of the library changed the college. Its existence was proof that even ruin has purpose, that what is sealed away is not lost, but resting until it can be understood differently. The Archmage declared that no artifact would be removed, no magic used to manipulate the ice. Instead, they built a new staircase around it, allowing visitors to descend and see, not to claim, but to witness. The mages began calling it the library beneath the ice, but among the townsfolk it gained another name, the Heart of Winterhold. Because it was there, in that buried quiet, that they finally understood what their city had become, not a ruin, a remembrance. The Stoic parallel. When philosophers from Solitude heard of the discovery, one of them wrote, "The library is not an archive, it is a mirror. It holds not what they knew, but what they became." And indeed, every object in that chamber seemed to hum with awareness. The ice had turned knowledge into reflection, pages into patience, words into waiting. The Stoics of the old world taught that wisdom comes not from accumulation, but from alignment. And here, deep beneath the frozen cliffs, the alignment was complete. Human ambition and natural law had finally agreed on something: stillness. The pilgrimage of reading. Years later, a new tradition began. Apprentices of the college, upon finishing their studies, would spend one night in the library. They would choose a single page, read it slowly, and then close the book forever. The act was not about learning, but letting go. They called it the quiet reading. It became a rite of passage. Each apprentice would descend a student and ascend a listener. Some left offerings behind: a candle, a quill, a strand of hair braided with frost. The air grew thicker with memory each year, and those who entered after said it felt not cold, but calm, as if the ice itself had learned to cradle rather than consume. The last entry, the final page discovered in the library, was written by a scholar named Solana, the same woman whose diary had been found centuries earlier, frozen above ground in another part of the city. Her words here were shorter but deeper, as though she knew they would be her last. If anyone finds this, do not unfreeze what the world has chosen to hold still. There is peace in the pause. Remember us not as what we made, but as what we meant to become. No one knew how her journal had ended up below, or if she herself had ever descended here. But her words became the creed of the new Winterhold, the phrase engraved at the entrance of the college today. There is peace in the pause. The meaning beneath the ice. Scholars who visit the library now say that when the auroras are strongest, the chamber glows faintly from within, as though the books themselves are exhaling light. Some believe it is magica, others think it is memory warming into forgiveness. But all agree that it feels alive, a presence without demand, a knowledge without voice. The people of Winterhold no longer fear the ice. They call it the city's breath. It expands and contracts with the seasons, slowly reshaping the ground above. Every spring the frost cracks gently, and for a moment you can hear the faint echo of pages turning. Perhaps that is only imagination. But in Winterhold, imagination and truth have long since learned to share a language. The sea above, the words below. When the wind sweeps across the cliffs now, it travels from the sea to the college, then downward, through stone, through ice, through time, and ends in that buried room of books. The air trembles as though the ocean and the archives still speak in rhythm, one of water, one of memory, one of patience. And if you press your hand against the ice and wait, you might feel a pulse beneath it. A slow, steady rhythm, the heartbeat of a city that refused to die. Winterhold endures, not above ground, but below it, in words that learned how to live without warmth, in sentences frozen not to preserve, but to remind, that nothing truly vanishes, that silence itself is a kind of language, that what we freeze, we keep, and what we keep keeps us in return. The Walk of Light. Every year, on the longest night of winter, the people of Winterhold leave their homes before dawn. They carry no torches, no banners, no songs, only silence, and a single candle each. The ritual began as an accident, they say. Centuries ago, when the collapse was still a fresh wound, a group of mages wandered down to the cliffs during an aurora. They walked without speaking, their faces lit only by the sky. When they returned, they said nothing about what they had seen, only that the world had seemed, for a moment, to breathe with them. And so, the Walk of Light was born. The gathering before dawn. It begins in the courtyard of the college. There is no call to assembly, no sound to summon the people. They simply come, old and young, mage and fisherman, pilgrim and child. They gather quietly beneath the open sky, each holding a small candle protected by glass. The Archmage steps forward. She does not speak. She only lifts her candle, and with that motion, the procession begins. Hundreds of footsteps echo in snow. The only sound is the rhythm of walking, a steady, deliberate cadence that seems to sync with the heartbeat of the earth. No one leads and no one follows. They move together, not as a crowd, but as one continuous line of calm. The path. The path descends from the college through the remnants of the old city, past broken arches, past half-buried doorways, past the ghosts of homes that once held laughter and fear. Children are told to walk with soft feet so as not to disturb the stones. As they move downward, the wind begins to sing through the cracks of the cliffs, a low, resonant tone that blends with the sound of footsteps. Some call it the voice of the sea. Others call it the library breathing. No one corrects either, because both could be true. Halfway down, the procession pauses before a large stone engraved with old words. There is peace in the pause. It was placed there decades ago, carved from ice-hardened granite, taken from the ruins below. Every year, each walker stops here, lowers their candle, and closes their eyes. No prayer is spoken, no wish made. They simply stand still, to honor stillness itself. After a few moments, the wind changes direction, and the line begins to move again. The descent to the sea. By the time they reach the cliffs, the horizon is glowing faintly, not from sun, but from the auroras stretching thin across the sky. The sea below is frozen in places, its surface fractured into mirrors that catch and scatter light. Each candle's reflection multiplies 100-fold until it looks as though the ocean itself is aflame. Here, the people stop. They stand at the edge, not to look down, but to look outward. No one speaks, but if you were to listen closely, you might hear their breathing blend with the sea's quiet rhythm. This is the heart of the ritual, not the walking, but the standing, the moment where motion and meaning meet and dissolve. The Mage's Offering. After a long silence, the Archmage raises her hand. From within her palm, a faint blue light emerges. Not spell, not flame, but magicka made humble. She passes it to the next person beside her, who passes it to another and another. Each candle it touches changes color, not bright, but soft, like frost catching moonlight. When the final candle is lit, the light stretches across the entire crowd, a single ribbon of blue woven through gold. From above, it must look like a living aurora upon the earth. Then, one by one, they set their candles down into the snow. Some on stones, some on ice, some directly onto the frozen sea. The flames flicker, but do not go out. And for that brief moment, Winterhold glows, not with power, but with peace. The children of silence. The children are the only ones allowed to speak. It is their task to recite the city's memory. Each one, chosen weeks before, learns a single line from the writings found in the library beneath the ice. They step forward, their voices soft against the night. Each line different, each carrying a piece of what once was. The sea did not take us. It returned us. We froze the world to remember how to breathe. Nothing is truly lost if someone remembers it kindly. Their words rise into the air and fade, joining the wind that passes over the cliffs. It is said that these voices are carried down to the sea, and that the sea replies in its own time, sometimes with waves, sometimes with calm. The walk back. When the last candle burns low, the people begin their ascent. They walk slower now, their faces calm, their breaths visible in the cold. The candles are left behind, tiny lights scattered like stars fallen onto snow. No one collects them, no one looks back. By dawn, the auroras fade, and the sky turns pale gray. The flames begin to die, one by one, until only smoke remains, rising gently like prayers without words. But something always lingers. The snow feels lighter, the air warmer, as though the city itself exhales after holding its breath all year. The philosophy of the walk. No one remembers who first said it, but there is an old saying now whispered in Winterhold: "We do not walk to reach the sea, we walk to remember the way." The walk of light is not pilgrimage nor penance. It is memory rehearsed until it becomes grace. Each step a syllable in a language that no longer needs translation. The Stoics would call it acceptance. The mages call it restoration. But to those who walk it every year, it is simply silence, shared. And perhaps that is the truest form of devotion. To honor the world not by asking of it, but by moving gently through it, the night of reflection. In the college, after the procession returns, the scholars gather in the Hall of the Elements. They light no candles, speak no spells. Instead, they sit in the faint glow of the auroras filtering through the cracked dome above. Each one holds a blank page. They write nothing upon it. They leave it white, a record of restraint. Later, these pages are bound together into a book each year, untitled and unreadable. It is called the Chronicle of Silence. Over the decades, the collection has grown heavy, its pages crisp and untouched, an archive not of thought, but of the decision to stop thinking. It rests beside the frozen library below, a twin to the words that once sought too much. Together, they form the memory of what the city has become and what it has chosen not to be again. The aurora's gift. Some years, when the auroras burn brighter than ever before, a strange thing happens. For a few moments, the lights above the sea shift color, from green and blue to soft gold. And within that glow, a faint image appears, the outline of towers, arches, and streets below the ice, as if the sea remembers the old city and chooses once in a while to dream it back into existence. The people never gasp, they never point, they simply watch and bow their heads. Because they know the sea's memory is fragile, and gratitude must be quieter than awe. Then, as the light fades, they whisper a single phrase that ends the ceremony. May the world remember itself the meaning of the walk. When travelers ask what the walk of light means, the people of Winterhold smile. Some say it is to honor the dead. Some say it is to greet the sea. But the truth is simpler and older. The walk is for the living, for those who must remember that loss is not destruction, and that beauty, even brief, is worth the cost of its impermanence. It is their reminder that everything, cities, books, people, light, exists only to pass through time, not to resist it. And perhaps that is why the walk endures. Because it is not a tradition, it is a truth, performed rather than spoken. Each candle, each footprint, each breath against the winter air is an act of understanding. The city that walks in silence. Long after the people have gone home, the candles remain. Their wax melts into the snow, their glass freezes, and the wind carries their smoke out to sea. At dawn, the first light of day strikes the cliffs, and the entire city glows faintly, as if lit from within. From a distance, it looks as though Winterhold itself is walking, a moving shadow of light across the frozen horizon. And perhaps, in a way, it is. Because to walk in silence, to remember without demand, to move forward while standing still, that is what the city learned from the sea. Closing reflection. The Stoics once said that wisdom is not found in stillness alone, but in motion made meaningful. The walk of light is Winterhold's living philosophy, a dance between memory and acceptance, between what was taken and what was finally returned. When the last walker reaches the college gates, the sky begins to pale. The wind carries the faint echo of footsteps fading into morning, and above the sea, the auroras linger one last time, not to remind, but to witness, not to speak, but to be seen. And in their silent movement, you can feel the whole story of Winterhold condensed into one soft truth. That light, even when lost, always finds another surface to rest upon. The sea and the sky. There are nights in Winterhold when the sea and the sky become one. No horizon, no separation, only light, endless, slow, and breathing. Those who live here say it happens only when the world is listening, when no wind moves and the sea lies still enough to mirror the heavens perfectly. The stars shimmer upon the water, the auroras bend downward, and the cliffs seem to hover between them, caught between reflection and reality. It is then that Winterhold ceases to be a place and becomes an idea. The horizon that vanished. The people call this phenomenon the joining. It lasts only a few minutes each year, yet it feels eternal. For that short time, everything doubles. Every candle, every star, every breath, every silence. The city glows without source, as though light is no longer something that travels, but something that simply is. Fishermen on the shore say that when it happens, the sea hums softly, a note too low to be made by waves or wind. Some scholars claim its resonance from the ruins beneath. Others believe it's the same frequency once heard in the library beneath the ice. But the elders smile and say, it is the sound of the world remembering itself. The mirror of being, to stand at the edge during the joining, is to witness a truth the world rarely shows. That reflection and substance are not opposites, but companions. The sea reflects the sky not to mimic it, but to remind it that beauty requires stillness. The sky bends to meet the sea, not to descend, but to understand. And between them, suspended, weightless, is Winterhold, a city that once fell, now held forever between remembrance and renewal. Here, even ruin has grace. Even silence has weight. Even time seems to hesitate, as though reluctant to move on from such symmetry. The song of the world, scholars once tried to record the sound that rises during the joining. They placed instruments along the cliffs, but every attempt failed. No echo, no vibration, no measurable tone remained. So they began to listen differently, not with their tools, but with their attention. What they discovered was not sound, but feeling. A deep interior resonance that began in the chest and spread outward until the listener could not tell whether it was the sea humming or their own blood remembering rhythm. One scholar described it as the space between prayer and breath. Another wrote, "It feels like standing inside a thought. The world has not yet spoken." Since then, no one has tried to measure it again. They simply listen, and in that act, they join it. The last Magus. Among the college's scholars lives a woman known only as the last Magus of Winterhold. No one knows her true age. Some say she was a student of those who found the frozen library. Others claim she was born the night the Bridge of Light first appeared. Each year, during the joining, she walks alone to the cliffs and stands at the edge until dawn. Her staff glows faintly, not from spell work, but from sympathy with the light around her. She says nothing. She never has. Once a young student followed her, curious why she never speaks. When he asked, she smiled and replied, "Because the world has already said everything worth saying." After that, he never asked again. When she dies, the people say they will not build a tomb. They will place her staff in the sea and let it drift until the water decides where to rest it, the reflection of the dead. Some nights, when the auroras are thin, you can see shadows beneath the water. Figures, faint but graceful, walking where the old streets once were. Not haunting, not reaching, simply moving. The locals do not call them ghosts. They call them the remembered, because here, death is not absence. It is continuity. The remembered do not disturb the living, and the living do not disturb them. Sometimes, on still nights, the reflections overlap. A man standing on a cliff sees himself doubled below, and for a brief instant he cannot tell which of them is alive. And perhaps it doesn't matter. For in Winterhold, existence is not defined by heartbeat, but by harmony. The children of tomorrow. A generation now grows that does not recall collapse, nor fear the sea. They play along the shore, drawing symbols in frost that vanish with the tide. They mimic the auroras with colored glass, their laughter mingling with the wind. The mages watch them and smile, because the children no longer see Winterhold as ruin, but as playground of light and memory. They are proof that the world renews itself not through rebuilding, but through forgetting what needs no longer be feared. They ask their elders why the sea sometimes glows at night. The elders answer softly, because it is thinking. The children accept this completely, and that acceptance, more than any wisdom, is what keeps the world at peace. The sky's descent. Once, in the deep of winter, the auroras burned so low they touched the sea. For hours, light rippled across the waves, folding over itself like silk in slow motion. Those who watched said it was as if the sky had decided to rest upon the water. And when morning came, a thin mist rose, glittering, weightless, like the breath of stars. The priests called it a blessing. The mages called it balance. But the Stoics of Winterhold said quietly, "The sky does not descend, and the sea does not rise. They remember they are the same." And so they named that day the reunion, a reminder that all divisions are temporary, that even opposites seek rest in one another. The Stoic city, eternal Winterhold today, is a place of arrival and departure. No one stays long, but everyone leaves changed. The air itself feels aware, as though it holds the memory of every thought, every silence, every person who ever stood upon these cliffs and tried to listen. The college remains, its walls aglow with auroral reflection. No towers rise higher, no gates close. It teaches only one thing now: alignment. Students learn not to wield magic, but to understand their place within it, to breathe with the rhythm of the world, to recognize that mastery is simply another word for surrender. And in that surrender, they find peace. The sea's final lesson. Every philosopher who comes to Winterhold writes the same conclusion differently. Some say it is the city that teaches. Others say it is the sea. But in truth, neither teach. They only reflect. For wisdom here is not delivered, it is absorbed. Like light sinking into water, like snow melting into soil, like silence settling into the heart. The Stoics believed the universe is perfect in its necessity, that even ruin serves purpose. Winterhold proves it, because from collapse came comprehension, and from comprehension, stillness. A stillness so deep that it became luminous. The sea remembers, the sky responds, and humanity, caught between them, finally learns to be quiet. The final light. At the close of each century, when the oldest scholars feel their time nearing, they climb the cliffs one last time at nightfall. They carry no staff, no robes, no words, only a small sphere of light, a spell so gentle it barely exists. They stand at the edge where the sea meets sky and release it. The sphere rises slowly, caught between air and reflection, until it disappears. They do not call it a ritual. They call it returning the light. Because here, even death is an act of participation, a continuation of the cycle that began long before the city and will last long after it. Some say that on clear nights you can still see those spheres drifting through the auroras, small, deliberate stars moving against the pattern, not falling, not rising, simply moving in balance. The people say they are not souls. They are reminders. That nothing created is ever truly gone, so long as it remembers how to move gently the world without distance. When the joining returns each year and the line between sea and sky disappears once more, the people of Winterhold do not gather anymore. They stay where they are, in homes, in the college, along the shore, and simply look outward. For they have learned that connection does not require proximity, that harmony is not an act, but a state of being. And when the horizon fades, they feel within themselves that same merging, the sea of memory meeting the sky of understanding. And in that union, something vast and quiet awakens. It is not faith, it is not revelation, it is recognition that the world was never broken. It only took this long for them to see it whole. The last word. Before dawn, when the auroras dim and the stars retreat, the people whisper the city's final prayer, a prayer without God or promise, only gratitude. We were given silence. We learned to listen. We are complete. And as the first light of morning crosses the sea, the cliffs of Winterhold shimmer gold, each wave a page of history turning, each breath a reminder that even the coldest places can hold warmth that never fades. Epilogue: the sky within the sea. If you could look deep enough into the water below Winterhold, you would find not ruins, not bones, not loss, but reflection. Endless, patient reflection. For the city did not fall. It descended into understanding, into memory, into its truest form. And if the sky were ever to look down and wonder what became of its mirror, it would see itself and know the sea never forgot. Winterhold endures, not as city, not as story, but as lesson. That silence is the highest language, and stillness the purest truth. Between sea and sky, between memory and becoming, it lives, forever listening, forever calm.